Hi, my friends.
Hi, dear friends. How are
How are
you?
you
Hi,
guys? I'm
friends.
fine. I'm, I'm fine.
Fine,
What
good
about
too.
you? Nora, Chris? Chris, fine. Nora's
We're
fine.
good. We're good here. Thank you.
That's great. That's just great. Thank the Lord. Guys, before we start today, I want to explain that we're having a really tough situation here in the state that I live in Brazil with these raining days. I think the Lord is getting much colder, but the internet connection is getting quite weak. So I'm not going to be able to open my video today so I can hear my friends here more clearly and talk to them more clearly. And we can go through these amazing chapters in a more um, intelligible way. Okay, before we start the chapters, Nora will, as always, bring us some prayer. She's gonna open for us so we can get calmer, get more focused, and then start.
Yes. All right, dear friends. Let's jump into that vibration and just thank Mother, Father, God for this opportunity. We kindly ask for your guidance as we study this book this evening, learning so many lessons, not only of the beyond, but most importantly, what we can gather to apply here as we are also in this big school of the universe. We ask for enlightenment and we will say the Lord's Prayer. And as we say the Lord's Prayer, we continue sending beautiful light to all our brothers and sisters who are going through a very difficult time right now in Ukraine. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever, and so be it.
Thank you, dear, so much. So we're gonna start talking about this book. I must confess to you guys that when I heard Nora saying about our brothers there in Ukraine, I got quite emotional here. So let's start. And this book is amazing because we can talk about spirituality, see that we have loads of things to be grateful for, and to have much hope in the future because the progress is the love of God, and everything will be fine. We're heading to better days. We are in chapter 5, which is called Brother Gattuso. Guys, at the end of last chapter, we saw Andrea Luis interested in the medical work of the Institute. Norah brought that chapter for us beautifully. And chapter 4 ended with him asking about the possibility of finding a colleague who would provide new educational elements for the experience and the beyond that he was seeking, looking for. He was sent to talk to this brother who was named Gattuso. And we have just um, that is the title of this chapter. So this chapter is titled Brother Gattuso. So we're in chapter 5. This man was described by Andrea Luis in the book as someone who still had very strong ties to matter. Andrea Luis also said that he had only a few years of awakened consciousness. So this is very important to for us to see who we are looking at here. Their conversation initially was about how Gattuso never denied the existence of something after death, and was a militant Catholic, and they bring this in the book. But at the same time, after he died, he realized that he had not received a decent education when it comes to spirituality. He was quite lost when he died and had to face what spirituality is actually about. They talked about how, in the spiritual plane, the number of patients and doctors um, was much greater, and how the spirit was a living body and subjected to material difficulties. This is very interesting because, as the book Oh, our our brother Chris, he left, but he's coming back. Let's keep on going because he will be back. As the books go on and we go from book to book, we're gonna see much more scientific perspectives about the spiritual plane and how this gets very, very profound when it comes to the amount of material that we have to face when we are talking about spirituality in those levels. We're not we're not yet on Jesus Christ levels. We're much less here down there. So this brother Gattuso he has a very good humor. That's what Andrelis tells us. He said that being Catholic, he imagined that he would have a passport to heaven. And this is very, very funny because he says that the diplomatic service of his church is not well served in heaven. So that is why he couldn't enter. He said that before he died, the priest, the parish father he attended, had guaranteed that he would go to heaven. This is a very serious situation because we today, 2022, we see spiritual leaders promising a heaven that they can. That Chris is back. Let me add him to stream. Add to stream. You're back, bro. Welcome. So we are living in 2022 and we're still seeing spiritual leaders who promise a heaven they can't promise, but they keep doing that. He said that before he died, this priest asked for a couple of money and then promised that he would go to heaven. Gattuso said that after all the difficulties he went through in the spiritual plane, at that moment, the most impressive thing for him was the amount of service there was in the spiritual world, in that realm. All the things that were happening. Gattuso explained that in that transition zone, and Norah talked with us about that zone last week, as the work was very heavy, they were all entitled to vacations. And these vacations for the spirits who had already achieved this merit were basically about spending some time, and the directors could spend a year on higher spheres. But he told Andre Luis that he had not yet had that experience. He still didn't have the access because he didn't have merit for those noble areas. Then Andre Luis asked him about the situation he was in, and he went from being very well humored to being very emotional and sad. He said that actually he confessed that he had not yet gotten used to the physical death. He wasn't still accepting that reality. He said that he was a doctor, as Andre Luis was a doctor, while incarnate, and that he had a very good financial situation. He said that his wife's name was Marilia and that they had two young children. Oh, Chris, laughed again. Yes, here, guys, here in Brazil, these problems with internet connection, they are really common on rainy days. So it's common. He's gonna come back. Gattuso said that they lived in a complete family harmony. This is very nice. And that the first discomfort was pneumonia, by which he was afflicted, and that he said that that was the reason why he died. Unfortunately, after much pain on the spiritual plane, when he finally managed to visit his old home, he saw that his ex-wife was already married to a cousin of his named family, a cousin of his named Carlos. And then we can really relate his history with Andre Luis because we from Nosolar we saw that Andre Luis when and he went back to the earth, to the crust, to see his family. He saw that his wife as well had already gotten married. And when he met Marilia again, it was the day after the birth of her second child with Carlos. And on top of all that, Carlos was a terrible husband and stepfather. After telling him, he told Andrea Luis that almost 10 years had passed and his Hurst was still alive, as if was the first hour. So we start seeing why he wasn't yet this elevated spirit, although he had this amount of beautiful work with that medical care in the spiritual world. And Luis told his personal experience, as we've mentioned here, and that we saw in the book Not So Large, the first book. And we know that experience. And then Andrea Luis asked Gattuso to put himself in his wife's place. If he had stayed on Earth, wouldn't he have married again? Probably yes, especially being the man. Changing the subject, he asked if Andrea Luis knew about reincarnationist works, to which Andrea Luis replied yes, remembering the case of Sigismundo. And we've seen this case in the book The Messenger. So another interesting thing to talk about here is that the books, they will start talking about previous books, previous experiences more and more, because it's really well connected. Gattuso explained that in that band, they only worked with the lower order reincarnation works. And again, as we've seen in the book The Messengers, we had this perspective about how elevated spirits reincarnate. Chris is back. Let me add him to stream. Um, Hi, bro. Welcome. You're back.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Andrea Luis said that in that situations, those elevated spirits reincarnating, he had a couple of experience. And then Gattuso said that in those lower regions, the spirit that would be reincarnated had to compulsorily accept the plans of the benefactors from above, because they were not able to help the incarnation process themselves. This is very sad. Here, and reflecting about that, it's interesting for us to remember that, again, in the book The Messengers, we saw that the superior spirits, when they reach a certain level, they can even choose the body they want to use when they reincarnate. So we see this huge difference between those that had prepared themselves to that when it comes to this real spirituality, this honest search for the gospel, and those brothers and sisters that could not prepare themselves. Um, when Raoul saw and the amount of knowledge that Gattuso already had, he asked how he could get stuck in those old regrets about his old home. He tried to appear jovial and as we've talked, Gattuso was had this very good humor, and he said that in view of the difficulty he had in his own domain, he was preparing a reincarnation right in his own home to dissolve the bad feelings. So this is very interesting because we see here a spirit that he has the knowledge, but he can control his feelings. That's why the only way that he sees, the only possibility that he's seen for his future is to reincarnate among those people that he's not having a good relationship with. So with this veil of forgiveness, they can all live in peace and try to rebuild those feelings, those good feelings again. With the rebirth forgotten, he would work to rebuild love on more solid foundations. He explained to Andrea Luis that the two of them, as they had been doctors, were used to working with the physical cell, but that there in those realm, it was necessary to work mostly with the mental cells. This is very interesting, and that always in the healing process they need to pass on the sick. Um, they need to tell every time some good word that could readjust their souls. very special. In view of Gattuso's difficulties, Andrea Luis wondered how he had been refused um, and reused for spiritual medical service so quickly because as we've seen he was not working with elevated spirits, he was refused, but he was working a lot, he was serving as a doctor in that sphere to loads and loads of um, sick spirits. When he thought, and this is very interesting, this part of the book, when Andrea Luis thought about that, he noticed that Gattuso did not receive his thoughts, even partially, showing much less exercise than Andrea Luis in the faculties of mental penetration. And then Andrea Luis resolved the matter. When he realized that, that's when seeing that sad line of needy spirits that Gattuso was to attend, Andrea Luis understood that for that type of spirit, so materialized with such coarse and slow vibrations, a disembodied doctor was needed who was still very connected to the immediate interests of the earth crust. This is very interesting. Guys, I went over my time a little bit, so sorry. I'm passing the word here to Chris.
So let's go chapter 6 during the night. Andrea starts the chapter describe the atmosphere between day and night in Fabiano's transitory house, which was almost imperceptible because during the lights is on.
Chris has frozen here almost upside down. I think his internet connection is not cooperating as well. Bro, I don't know if you can even hear me. Maybe if you try to, he's here. Maybe if you try to close your camera, I don't know if that would happen. Oh, he left.
I
Yes,
was,
internet.
while we wait for him, I could easily talk a little bit about, if you don't mind,
Yes,
about Gotuzo. I think he represents a lot of, at least for me, I connected with him because, he brought an important point. Here on Earth,
yes,
we are taught that humankind is simply a species in the order of primates, right?
yes,
And then religion is teaching us, oh, we have this soul. And he said he
yes.
wasn't ready, neither science nor
Mhm.
religion ever prepared us. And I think you mentioned João several times, and also by Andre, right? That he was on his way. We could see his level of
Yes,
enlightenment or evolution. And when we see that, someone who might have a little bit more conviction would turn this around and say, okay, yes, this is evolution and this is
yes,
spirituality, right? Yes, we might be called primates, but it's because we're all one, and he
yes,
is still feeling like we're a different part, that we're humans and that animals are separate, in these um, phylogenic trees. When
yes,
actuality, as spiritists today, we know that we're all connected into one, and we know that religion is part of the process. I know later in the chapter, um, the spirits do mention that it's not the religion that is the
yes,
cause, it's us that we make decisions, because we're going to be talking about Father Domenico shortly. And
yes.
it's very interesting, that right there, that perspective. um, I went to I don't know if you know a Doctora Irvenia Prada, I think that's her name, and she gave this really
That's
amazing.
interesting. Her name is much like mine, right? Prado.
I'm like,
Yes,
okay, well, the names. And she had
yes,
a great talk on evolution. Yeah, there
yes.
you
That's beautiful. Hi,
go.
bro.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
So sorry. about
No, that's fine.
that bugs.
We
So
might, I
chapter,
think Chris said you might want to take the camera. I mean, João, right?
Yes, bro. Maybe if it helps, in my case I turned my camera off because it really helps to get a better sound voice and to hear you guys much clearer.
okay, let's chapter 6.
Yes,
During
it's
the
much better.
night, André start the chapter describe the atmosphere between day and night in Fabiano's house territory, uh, which was almost imperceptible because during their entire stay there, artificial lights were always on. He also described a huge fog that was mixing the landscape with the dark gray sky, and the sun seemed without any rays, and the fresh air machines run 24 hours a day to to let the pure atmosphere. And Andrea had crossed through places like this many times, but he never before stayed for so long time in such an unpleasant, dark sphere like this, one where matter obeyed the law of corrupting mental principles, the lack of vegetation, and the suffocating fog pass a profound sense of sadness. Although our friends and sister Zenobia did everything they could to turn this help shelter in pleasant oasis, someone order to the
Yes, we're having some trouble with Chris internet connection. Dear, we have reached the first 30 minutes. At least
Night.
that's what. Oh no,
Yes.
we're not. Yeah, yes, because yes,
22
because
minutes.
yes,
Oh,
but it's already pointing
let's.
in
I have the
the
two chapters,
yes.
so
Since you
let
have
me.
the
Uh,
chapters, I think that it's best for us to move on because we still in 30 minutes we're gonna start Paul and Stephen's studies. So it's best if we can keep on going. I'm gonna talk to Chris here.
No worries. All right, dear friends. So just to keep in mind that we are again in the Casa Transitoria, the Tracy's home. Um, it's just like a location, right? Remember from last time we studied that this is a place that they move, right? So they're constantly moving. It's like an ER, and so there are souls there, and this is also a house that is constantly being bombarded by very very low spirits, and even when they have to go to this place, as we studied, they had to go through so many areas to reach to here. And the reason this is important because chapter 6 starts talking about them, about Father Domenico, right? How he was there, and so now we go into. So they talked a lot about him feeling like I'm here, and like Jean said earlier, he felt as a priest he should have been in heaven, and he was not in heaven. He was in this very low place, and he was having these conflictions of as to why this was happening. And we see though that Zenobia was always in this chapter still there, hanging on, right? And they also, I think it's interesting that as this was happening, Andre again describes these beings, right? These lower entities just coming in, and they were trying to take away that vibration. And Zenobia found herself again saying, okay, they had these little electrical shock rays, these little devices that were shocking that energy. And, just to wrap up this chapter, it's interesting how, you know, saving that one person, because they were obviously, as this ER station was working with Father Domenico, right? That was shaking the vibration around this area, this in this dimension, so much that these lower entities would not stop trying to get a hold of this casa transitoria, but to see the how much these spirits, right? Because the title of this book is Workers of Life Eternal. So we're seeing this work behind the scenes, and we're seeing to the extent, right, that these workers are going to save this one person. It's incredible. There's this song in Spanish, but it's like Eran sin ovejas. So it's, or even the Bible, we know God, Jesus, to go and save one sheep, right? He would go out of his way, out of the
So
90.
just to talk about that song that I love, love, love that song. There's a song um called Reckless Love
Ah,
by Kari Absuri. It's beautiful song, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful song. Even Justin Bieber recorded this Christian song. It's beautiful.
oh my gosh, I would love to listen. I'm right, but I feel like that was kind of what's happening here, and I think us too. We don't even realize whether it be discarnate or incarnate, just the love of these brothers and sisters, because they're just like us. These are, you know, to the extent. I thought that was very beautiful. And then chapter 7 continues now that they have Father Domenico, and Father Domenico is in a state. He's not good. But we talked about how in this community, everybody has a part, and Luciana has a special connection with the patients. She uses that clairvoyance, or here on earth we might call it mediumship. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but she's gonna help Father Domenico process everything. And so it's almost like a little therapy that they're having, and he is still in distraught. And even for us to imagine, wow, he was a priest, what got him to this very, very low vibration? And as they're doing this therapy, we find out about 5 victims. So we don't have enough time to go through every case, but we can make a one sentence that are these 5 victims that Domenico affected, they all, because of him, they experienced betrayal, deceit, abandonment, empty promises, and unfriendliness. I mean, these are very heavy things that Domenico had somehow forgotten, but at the same time, he carried in his consciousness, because there was a story, one of them specifically, that um, he was at the moment he gets poisoned to disincarnate, and one of the fathers there comes and tells him, oh, you know, you were forgiven, but he carried it so much in his consciousness that that's how he ends up there. And so as they're like talking about this, all of a sudden the Ernesto's mom, appears in the picture, and it was very emotional, because even though Domenico was in a very low vibration, he was able to connect to that mother energy. And then the truth comes out. And I think it's very liberating in that sense, because of that love, because of that connection. Now, everybody, even us as readers, we're ready for the truth. It turns out that Zenobia was going to get married with Domenico before he was a father. And that I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. And so of course, Domenico says, I kept that inside of me. Like, he was so resentful. He was like, because I could never have Zenobia's love, I became a priest. And he felt that being a priest would help him forget everything. And so mom tells him, you know, we have to forgive. And she's like, son, just think about her position too, like where she was. And so to end the summary of this chapter, we have to imagine how everybody here plays a really critical role. to help Domenico. We have mom Ernestina being that support, that love. We have Luciana, who was that worker, right? That clairvoyant helper to do kind of like that spiritual therapy. And then we have everybody around, right? Because Andre's telling us the story. So there was a little group, them watching. They were supporting with their mental vibrations. And of course, we have Zenobia, who planned this all out. I love that Andre does this because remember, friends, Zenobia is the director of Casa Transitoria, but she's also a spirit just like us who has to work, those issues. And this is absolutely phenomenal. Some of the points, just to wrap up, would be one, um, what is his reason to become a priest were not in the right place, but even if they were not initially, maybe at one point he could have made a choice to say, you know what, I'm already here, I'm going to take advantage of this, and he didn't. And it's so important for us to, as we study spirituality, um, to be, in that intention, to understand that it's not just to call ourselves spiritual, or to put on ourselves as that, but it is to practice, to have those intentions. Because I think in the next chapter they even have a spiritist in that place who were like, but I studied Becerra de Menezes, and they still are in this conflicted mind frame. So when our intentions are well, we have all the support, right? In Zenobia, even in this planet, is constantly saying, even though you have the support, a lot of brothers and sisters, they still don't accept the support. And so I think that Domenico was still too embedded into that pain, into that hurt, which is the next thing. But we cannot talk about this, but just for us to kind of think about, how are we in our relationships? you know Going through a breakup is not easy. Oof, I went through one, dear friends. It was so hard, but I think the part of letting go is the part where we learn and we grow. And Domenico, just he held on to that resentful feeling and saying, oh, he was so angry. And so it's so important for us to let go if we find ourselves, and let them be at peace, right? There is a song, I think it's Brazilian, by Marisa Monte, and she says, love is like the wind. I can't remember the exact thing, but it is true. Love is a wind. Let it fly and let it go. And as we let it go, it comes back. So I thought that was really, really it's nice. And to model Zenobia, because Zenobia too was in this. She was genuinely in love with Domenico, but life did not. The recurrent to her plan was not for them to be together, and she also did not hold on to that vibration. She didn't even get emotional. Gosh, we didn't even know that they were in love until much later. And her purpose there was to help him to continue showing love, to be in that forgiveness. And I thought that was really beautiful. That lovely thought of science, right? So, and just to continue praying. I think in several times here we saw that mental vibration and all of that. Okay, chapter 8 is very, very interesting. This describes a time. So this chapter is going to talk about that ethereal fire that I think chapter 4 or 5 I think told us about, that it was going to clean. There was this battle, and as they're having this spiritual thing going on, there is something that comes and cleanses the air in this particular vibrational state, dimension, however we feel comfortable seeing this or connecting to Casa Transitoria. And so now they have Father Ippolito come in, and he's given a lot of inspirational messages. He quotes the Bible he's just very straightforward, and he's just talking to these suffering spirits in hope that light comes in before the fire comes and cleans the area, right? But we see from those lower spirits lots of attacks with words, very degrading messages, trying to taunt and say all these very negative things, right? but it got to the point that it escalated because, not only Father Ippolito, but Zenobia, they just were very peaceful, very calm. Well, these spirits got so frustrated because they were not getting what they wanted. They started sending these balls of black substance. And again, we have this idea for us to see how the world in this dimension works, how they fight against one another, but instead of sending or anything negative, Sanovia says, unfurl the defense nets, right? So these nets are probably a way to grab the substances to still cleanse the air, which is absolutely beautiful. One dark spirit confronts Ippolito, and have you ever even seen God? Like they, right? And Ippolito says, don't forget, the knowledge of God is within us. So this was incredible. Well, there were so many voices. There's like, they're just getting louder and louder. So maybe Andre's alluding again to us these whole sound wavelengths and how that was another way, perhaps, right? This sound battle was playing tricks and it hit on someone. Andre got so upset because imagine him, like these are his friends, and then you're seeing these spirits, just doing all these atrocities using that language, and they're just standing there showing love, right? And that is very hard. That is very difficult to do. Because we all want to be impulsive and we want to react. And so Andre gets upset. He's like, well, why don't you do anything about it? Just make it stop. And then he said, Andre, we do not extinguish them. You need to extinguish your vibration. And so he calms down a little bit. And so after all of this back and forth happening, Zenobia finally gives this message um, and saying, okay, come on, spirits, last chance, come on. And she says, throw these life saving strips, right? To see if anybody, almost like, I feel like you grab onto this, right? Is there anything? But nobody came, nobody took advantage. So Zenobia uses this little device that allows and amplifies her voice. So again, we see this whole picture of sound, because these beings are trying to take everything down. They try to break, almost like they're trying to break this magnetic fence. But Zenobia, they have these tools that will overcome. And she's like encouraging everyone and says, I just want to let you all know that in a few hours, this purifying fire is going to go by. So come on, let us help you. And then the lights were turned off. So that's how this chapter is heading. And we see so much happening. And so we can think of this as understanding the battles that happen, right? I'm going to go really fast because I only have like 5 minutes, but think of it. Sometimes we think battles are a way, we're very impulsive, but here it's not impulsive, it's very strategic, it's very peaceful, and it's very loving because, battles don't necessarily have to be. I know we're going through something right now, but every day we've even before this, we've always had battles. Talking to a friend, we've had wars of discrimination, wars of famine, wars of poverty. But even within ourselves, I thought it was interesting how Andre brings this idea of sound. And think about it. I read this book called The Untethered Soul, which I really recommend because we always have that little inner voice inside of us. And I always think like maybe it's almost like a metaphor, like an analogy when we're thinking and we hear the voices and they were getting louder and louder. And it was so hard to fight these voices, right? But Zenobia had to be even louder, not aggressive, not impulsive, louder in love, louder with that message of just being kind, being loving, reminding them to pray. So I think that not just Zenobia, but even Father Ippolito's message of love and everyone was really a very nice way to unify, right? And to keep our mental vibrations in check, right? And always remembering, dear friends, how we have a lot of influences around us. And even if our voices get very loud, we can have, control over them. We can, just like Andre slipped a little bit, but he came back. And there are tools. So even though this is a scenario in a different world that Andre shares with us, we bring this down to us, checking our thoughts, checking how we react, checking, are we at peace? What are we sending? And right now it's very difficult because initially we want to be impulsive and aggressive, like Andre. Why does it not end? Why does it not finish? Right? But we learn so much from here. There's just something they talked a lot about. It's not about extinguishing, it's about loving and being here and supporting while they're going through their experience. Because if we were to just get them out, right, then they're going to start blaming. Oh, well, you want to, like, the expression they use, oh, we're going to get you out, so now you're controlling us. And God is not about controlling, it's all about free will. And so as we are struggling in so many battles and wars, not just the current one but also in our own lives and society, it's very, very nice to keep this in check and be louder, right? Louder with that Zenobia's voice of peace and love, dear friends. I thought it was
That's so
magnificent.
beautiful.
Yes,
Beautiful, beautiful.
I'm
That's so
getting good.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, that chapter is really, really beautiful. Before we finish here, I would like to point a couple of things as well. Nora brought a very interesting dialogue that we have in the book when a spirit that is in this lower zone asks, "Have you ever seen God? Have you even seen God?" And then we go back to the spirit's book, question number 10, when Kardec asks the spirits if we could know that um, profound nature of God, and then the spirits respond, "No, you don't have what it takes to understand God." And then we see that it's actually about an evolutionary state, not just about being this physical planet, this physical body, because we see discarnate spirits that haven't yet been any closer to God, even though they are in the spiritual world. So the book is constantly reminding us that death does not transform our spirits. And a very important thing that we take from this chapter, another important thing, there are loads of things, is that the perispirit needs to evolve as well. And it will keep evolving just as our spirits needs to evolve. And our perispirit will also get more and more dematerialized. This is very important. Another thing, this chapter that Nora brought for us, and there is a scene here, a very strong scene when we see this Domenico having the opportunity of seeing his mom, so he would have this shock, this huge emotional that would transform his spirit and would be able to um, take him from one vibratory state and take him to another. And again, we were talking last week about Joe Dispenza's books. And it's very interesting when we see this type of knowledge in the spiritual book that was psychographed in the 40s in last century, because now we see loads of doctors, as we bring a couple of times here, just Spencer example, that are talking about the power that those good, and they could be bad, but that those good huge emotions can cause on our health care. They could heal us because it would act like a placebo, and we could get healed. Another thing that is very interesting about that chapter, with that old lady who asked for help. We see in this chapter an old lady that she says, "I can't take this anymore. Please help me. I know I'm not a good person and I haven't done good things while I was incarnated on earth, but I need help. I need help. I can't take this anymore." And we see that when, and Nora was telling us about all those spirits that were there, and we see that when this one lady, she screams for help, she says that she can't get that anymore, those other spirits, they start asking for help as well. And we this is very interesting because we see how those feelings, they are contagious, and we have seen this before in Andrea Luis books, and we're seeing again this in a very practical way in this Ukraine war, when we see that in one side we have this courageous feelings being very contagious, and on the other side we see that all that hatred that is also very contagious. So we need to take very much care and watch very dearly and with love for our thoughts, because they spread and they are matter, essentially matter. In another thing in that chapter that Nora was talking about, we see that those bad thoughts, they materialize and they go direct in Andrea Louise' direction and other benefactors' directions, as this amount of deleterial fluids in the shape of a ball. It's very, very impressive. And before we finish here, I still want to point another thing. When we see the reports from the lower zones, we realize how our tradition comes from a place more similar to this hell, properly talking about that types of hells, and that we still have no idea of those beautiful skies, because we are much more attached from that, and actually from those lower zones, those lower vibratory zones. And then we see the Old Testament being very good when it comes to describing hells, multiple types of hells. We see even in the New Testament very good descriptions of hells. But when it comes to the sky, when it comes to those higher zones, we're not yet capable of talking about them, because we actually haven't been there. This is a very interesting thing, because as we've talked about, those books that Andrea Luis brings for us via Chico Xavier's mediumship, they are very technological, and they are scientific. So we're seeing a very real perspective about those lower zones. But even Andrea Luis, he can't describe a heaven for us yet, because that's where we are as humankind. Dear, and do you want to say something else before we finish here?
I just want to say, João, you're telling us this message that we have to sit and read the books, because we
Yes.
miss out so much. We could, oh my God, we it's just a lot, and we encourage you to read, reread, because we always get a different perspective. But I mean, you're right. 100 Louise is on the spot with the science, and like you mentioned, Joe Dispenza, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of science that's coming and rising up.
Yes. And relating to those books, it's amazing.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, and I want to reaffirm what Nora just said. It's really important that everybody that's studying with us read the books, because we are not capable of bringing everything. We don't have the time. It would be humanly impossible for us to bring everything. And there are so much interesting knowledges and things on those books. So we ask you guys and encourage you guys that are watching right now with us, that will watch later, to read the books, because they are amazing and they teach us a lot. I want to thank you guys so much. I had an internet problem. Chris had another one, and an unexpected internet problem. Nora is here with us, always very kind, always very brave, holding everything together. Thank you, dear, so much. We'll be here next week on the Wednesday, as always. And this week we couldn't be here Wednesday, but next week we're here again talking about our third day of this amazing, amazing book. Thank you guys so much. We wish everybody a great night, end of night here in Brazil and there in the United States of America. Thank you guys so much. See you guys like
Friends.
next
Thank
week.
you. Thanks, friends.
Bye bye.
Bye.